Gentlemen, we are rolling. Go ahead.
Thank you, Michael. Well, today is March 23rd, 2024. We are in New Orleans, Louisiana for the 62nd annual AmSECT conference. My name is Mark Carouse, and we are going to be interviewing William DeBois, otherwise known as Bill, right? What do you prefer?
Bill DeBois, yes.
Bill DeBois. Bill has been in the field for a long time. What we'd like to do is go through a series of questions, Bill.
Sure.
But enough of them are open-ended that if you want to go into one area in more depth than another, feel free to do that. We've got about 60 minutes
Okay.
that's allowable. So the first question I'd like to simply ask is, what were the circumstances that led you to become a perfusionist?
Yeah, good question. Well, first I'd like to thank you for inviting me here to do this presentation and question and answer. So I don't have an amazing heart story, but I did have a heart murmur when I was a little kid, and I guess it closed up by the time I was in grade school. I started school at Stony Brook University in New York at Stony Brook. I was an economics major, and in one of the courses it was a research study where I went into the hospital and we were comparing a panel test versus a test that doctors would order a series of different tests. And basically the outcome was that panel provided all the information at a much less cost, and then you saw that popularized and kind of to where we are today. That was a long time ago. But while I was in the hospital, I did get an interest in healthcare. My family were mostly bankers. I had done internships in banks, and I just didn't find myself sitting behind the desk calling people. And so I did look into the hospital had the Health Sciences Center, and I had been an athlete all my life and was interested in performance, either performance improvement or monitoring performance of high-level athletes. So they had a cardiorespiratory sciences program. So I looked into that. I got into the program, and then in the program, one of the electives was perfusion. So we did get to look at that. I went to North Shore University Hospital and worked with Yehuda Tamari on that. And from there, most of my work was with research on animals. They were studying cardioplegia at the time. And I met a surgeon, Dr. Anthony Tortolani.
Yes.
One of the first surgeons I met. He was an athlete himself. His son was a big athlete. We got to know each other. I wasn't allowed in the OR really, but I think my experience with Yehuda, I learned probably a lot more than I would have just sitting behind the pump, not really knowing what was going on. I got to do some surgery, some research, learn research skills, and then also operated the pump. So that's.
And who was at Stony Brook at that time, Bill, who preceptored you or actually taught you to do perfusion? Yeah,
most of the training, well, there was Bill Trainer and Edgar Anderson. They were the program leads. And Lou Caramonte, he was our perfusion instructor.
Sure.
Lou's passed since, but when we learned about the system, he actually had us draw what we thought a bypass system looked like. In retrospect, it was quite hilarious, like what people were drawing. But then we got into the clinical aspects, and then we learned a lot more, and then took it from there.
Sure. Well, you mentioned Dr. Yehuda Tamari. That was all in the laboratories, right?
Yes.
Did you work with animals as well as
Primarily,
benchtop?
we mostly animals, yeah. So we got to do some surgery, learned about blood, the engineering aspects of the heart-lung machine. Learned a lot from Yehuda. What do you call everybody? Doctor. And then we'd go up to the operating room, but we didn't really do all that much, so I thought my time would be better spent with Yehuda, and I feel it did.
Sure.
The Stony Brook program was very theoretical, and years later you got to appreciate all that you learned, but initially it was a little tough. Yeah.
Now, the Stony Brook program at that time really didn't have several affiliate hospitals where you went to see or do cases. Is that right? You mentioned
Yeah.
Longshore.
North Shore,
Or
we
North
went
Shore.
to St. Francis was a big hospital. They were two of the biggest hospitals on Long Island. I believe LIJ as well. Stony Brook wasn't doing open heart back then.
Okay. And how long was, quote unquote, your training period, Bill?
So that was primarily, it was a little over a year with the training. And then at the time they weren't credentialed. So we went through the process of that, and I later went back to school because initially I wasn't board eligible.
I see.
So it was probably 7 years later.
So what you're saying is Stony Brook was not an accredited training program?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, okay.
So it was a little work. They let you, what was called petition the board.
Yes.
So literally made like a whole manual of all the courses, and you got that letter that wasn't suitable to sit for the exam. So we worked hard.
It must have been a disappointment to get turned down from sitting for
Yeah.
your boards.
It was. But then I went to Newark Beth Israel with Dennis Fox,
Yes.
trained with them, learned more, met Dr. Parsonet, another great surgeon. And actually, it pushed me to do well on the exam, did quite well on the exam. And then continued my career.
So after Stony Brook, or let me back up a bit. A little over a year for training. Do you remember your first solo case without somebody standing over your shoulder?
So that was, that was when I had a job. I started at Maimonides Medical Center.
Maimonides.
Dr. Cunningham was the program lead surgeon, and Richard Brunner was the perfusion chief director at the time. So worked with them quite a while, clinical work, and actually a lot of research work with Dr. Cunningham's lab.
So that was in 1982 to 1988, from what I gather.
Yes.
As a staff perfusionist at Maimonides, and then you became chief for 3 years, 88 to 90, is that right?
Yes, I was chief at the program. During that time, we were starting a perfusion program at Downstate, SUNY Downstate. So I got started, and then right around 90, I left there and went to the New York Hospital, which is now called New York Weill-Cornell.
Sure. What were the circumstances of you becoming the chief after being on staff?
Right. So chief at Maimonides, and then chief on a bigger program at Cornell, and that was with Dr. Wayne Isom.
Sure.
So I remember we were interviewing with him, and I was kind of proud of. We did a lot of LVAD work.
Yes.
So I was talking to Dr. Isom about that, and he kind of said, "Well, we try not to be experts at LVAD. You'll learn quickly. We don't do many of them." And actually, we didn't. We saw a lot. One of the big advancements I'd seen in the technology was the retrograde cardioplegia. So they used a lot of that, and very rare did we put balloon pumps in. The results were quite well. My entire career probably, and then the programs got bigger. We opened up 2 other programs through Cornell and under his leadership. Probably over almost about 60,000 cases that I was over.
Very big number. I'd like to rotate back to what sort of research you did with Dr. Cunningham. Wasn't he a myocardial protection guru?
Big on that. So a lot of work with that, different additives to the cardioplegia, venting strategies. He also did a lot of work with LVADs. We actually worked with the company, they're out of business, I think it was LCATH, it was called, where we did pulsatile perfusion. And it was pulsatile for routine bypass. So interesting system. It was fluid operated, and they wanted it synchronized to the EKG. And the reason I mention that is because the system like the BVS 5000 was something that seemed to follow that, but it was not fluid filled, and it was not synchronous, and that became successful to many of the devices.
This was not the Tamari caplet pulsator, was it?
No, actually, that group was at Maimonides as well earlier. Not Tamari, but who was that? The balloon pump. Oh, Dr. Kentrowitz.
Yes.
that was developed there at Maimonides. So
But had he moved on to Detroit when you were at Maimonides, or did you know Dr. Kantrowitz?
I did not know him. I think he had left right soon before I got there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you still practicing perfusion, Bill?
I do. Primarily it's ECMO.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've maintained accuracy with that. And then also sometimes I'll assist on cases, but yeah.
So when did you, when did you get into the field? When did you finish at Stony Brook?
So I finished in '82, started.
Okay.
Then I was in Maimonides till '90. And then Cornell from '90 to 2020.
That's a long time.
Yeah. A lot of good experience at Cornell.
Well, I really wanted to follow up on the Cornell Weill Center because it was very, very busy. You were doing 1,500 cases a year average, is that right?
In Cornell, and then 500 to 800 at the other two sites, each one.
And you had to manage the perfusion teams for those two sites,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about the challenges of managing a very heavy clinical load and scheduling, and obviously personalities come in and call? I mean, tell us how you manage a huge program like that, Bill.
Well, it was interesting. When I started at Cornell, I was a bit younger than most of the staff there. And I remember there was one of the staff members, I remember coming up to me and they said, you know, this was all fine until you got here.
Oh,
And I was
gee.
like, ooh. So I remember talking with Dr. Isom, and he says, well, what seems to be the issue? I don't know, they all have these great ideas. And he says, well, just ask them. He says, what's your idea? What do you think we could be doing better? And then I did do that, and I don't know. He had some simple ways to fix problems.
Sure.
Learned a lot from him. And so we went with that, and I said, well, if it was so good before I got here, I probably wouldn't be here. So so we managed that. So some of the scheduling changes we did, we hired more staff. We had some perfusion assistants at the time, which helped. And then when we opened up the other programs, we added some more staff, and we had site leads at each of the programs.
Okay.
So that helped manage that. And I always believed in, delegating some of the responsibilities for the staff. So some like doing scheduling. So we had staff do that. Protocols and processes for manuals. Some people like to write. And we had a lot of nurses on the staff, nurse perfusionists. So they were very good at that. So they did a better job than I could have done. So in writing up protocols and the manuals, we had that done.
Well, historically, nurses were some of the earliest perfusionists,
Yes.
weren't they? And I imagine not all of them were certified.
Correct.
You obviously were certified. Were you sort of the outlier when you first went to
When
Cornell?
I first started, yes. And then as the programs developed and some people retired, just about every perfusionist was certified or board eligible.
Okay.
But the nurses had very good skills, their organizational skills, managing everything that we needed. They stuck to part of, I think, obsessive compulsive behavior is very good for a perfusionist.
Sure.
They stay focused on what they need to do, organized, very neat. So yeah, I think that's why we weren't a very heavily staffed group, but we managed to keep everything working smoothly. Yep.
Well, you've mentioned some surgeons, Dr.
Tortolani.
Tartolani,
Yep.
Dr. Cunningham, Dr. Isom. Are there any other surgeons that stand out in your mind
Yeah.
as really memorable, or even carrying it one step further, who helped you in your career, Bill?
Right. So Dr. Len Girardi, he's a big aneurysm surgeon. I've worked a lot with him, developing techniques with either blood conservation or managing people on either, we use left heart assist for the aneurysm surgery, or even full bypass circulatory arrest. Lenny Lee, did a lot of work with him on just the pharmacological management when the antiplatelet drugs came out, how we managed that. So wrote up a bit with him. who's a Carl Krieger when we got involved with the bloodless surgery. I don't know if you really Carl Krieger, he's a Hemingway. So when Dr. Isom said, we want you to write a chapter with Carl Krieger, it was like, whoa.
Really?
So I remember writing it up, and he probably cut it down in half. It was maybe 20 pages, and he said, just stick to the facts. And so I read a lot of Dr. Gerald Buckberg's work. I liked the way he wrote.
Sure.
So I was trying to mimic his style, and so Dr. Krieger cut it down, and it worked well. We got the research worked out well for us. The bloodless surgery, we were successful with that, and then that writing continued. Also, Dr. Rosengart, did a lot of blood conservation with him when we developed the WRAP procedure.
That's Dr. Todd Rosengart?
Yes, yeah. So he's moved on. He's down in Texas now, but worked a lot with him on developing that procedure. Bob Helm at the time was a fellow of ours. He's up in New Hampshire now, but worked with him a lot on developing all these procedures. So that was quite rewarding. And then most recently, worked with Dr. Dr. Salemi, or Russ Salemi. He did a lot of coronary work and also structural heart. So with the structural heart work, I got involved with the cath lab a little more. And then he moved on and invited me to join him. And that's the new position I have now as the Vice President of Cardiothoracic Services.
In Jersey?
Yes, in New Jersey.
Okay. So you would consider Dr. Krieger, from what you just shared with us, he mentored you in a way, at least in the writing.
Sure.
And
yes.
But he was the one, as I understand it, who really said we need to minimize or eliminate transfusion use during surgery. Is that fair to say?
Basically, we have a goal of, we want to do 100 patients bloodless.
Wow.
Figure out how we could do it. So some of the ways we looked, with the Jehovah's Witness population, we had worked with some of their staff, and they had their liaisons at the hospital, and we got close with them, and obviously they don't want any transfusion. So,
Top. Just fell off.
The microphone here.
I think it needs to be on your collar there, Bill.
Yeah, it's rubbing up there against that. So why don't you just tuck that under again? Yeah, there you go.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Sorry.
We're still rolling, so you just pick up.
So we got to work with the Jehovah's Witness population, and we were very successful with them. And then we moved some of those techniques to the general population. And Dr. Krieger was instrumental in making sure that this worked. And we stretched some of the general guidelines on some, and actually quite successful, and managed to do the cases bloodless and develop new techniques. From that we developed a low prime. We used smaller caliber tubing, the WRAP technique.
Sure.
We, some people call it a normovolemic hemodilution.
Yes.
We called it intraoperative autologous donation.
Sure.
That we took on average in the studies 1,500 cc's of blood off.
Wow.
And on some 2 liters. But just about everybody, we have a nomogram for this basically weight and hematocrit. And that was quite successful. So it's interesting how all that worked, because when we presented these techniques, initially highly criticized. I remember the first one, not with bloodless surgery, but with the centrifugal pump.
Mm-hmm.
We presented there was differences when we used it, and initially it's like, it's too expensive, you must be working for the company now, and but it seemed to catch on. Most of the cases now are done with centrifugal pumps. The autologous donation, when we did that, it was dangerous, but we had good results. Even Bob Groom talked about it this morning with the nadir hematocrits.
Yes.
Was associated with a higher mortality. The key difference in what we did, the nadir hematocrit, the low, we went down to 16%. It was a temporary anemia, because we had 4 units of blood to give at the end of the procedure. And it was during a hypothermic period. So we never, I mean, New York State, we were typically the best in the state with mortalities under 1%. So we didn't have that 4% mortality. And we were kind of critical of that move because people did tend to transfuse more, and we were just going in the opposite direction.
Sure.
So we had that. And then when we did the wrap, it was kind of interesting. People thought it came out by mistake, like someone left a clamp off the line and you just invented a technique. But we saw that worked well. And even to this date, I hear people say it does not work, but if you don't quantify what wrap is, wrap was basically removing the entire pump circuit, then it really wasn't retrograde autologous priming. Some groups took off maybe 200 cc's and said it didn't work, or they had techniques that what I thought were kind of dangerous, disconnecting lines during the drain or disconnecting the pump, like on a centrifugal pump. So we explained it pretty well. We had diagrams, but it's interesting. But I think that techniques served the population well. So
Sure. When you do retrograde autologous priming, you have to coordinate with the anesthesiologist?
yes, yeah,
Because
And-
sometimes they tend to give a lot of fluid pre-pump,
right.
which negates anything you're trying to do to minimize.
Yeah, I mean, some of it was
Hemodilution.
counterintuitive, though, that we needed them to give that volume because we're going to take it off anyway.
Okay.
And they typically gave a liter to liter and a half, but we removed it. And so when you went on bypass, you didn't get that full flush of crystalloid. We called it crystalloid rush that caused edema, low blood pressure. So we avoided that.
Sure.
So we did it slowly, and we maintained the pressure over 100. So people said, well, it's dangerous. I said, well, no, we always maintain the pressure 100. People said, well, when you drain, you're going to be sucking air out of the cannula. And it was no, because the bag was actually higher than the patient. So it was always the patient's blood pressure. So even if you forgot to clamp the line, you could never exsanguinate the patient. But some groups were draining from the bottom of the floor, and I mean, it's just uncomfortable position. Like,
Sure.
I think as a perfusionist, you don't realize when you're taking care of someone's life, how long you're like crunched over like that. And a lot of
Yes.
perfusionists have neck injuries from that, and not just
Sure.
from wrapping, but just, hunching over. So I think we designed it well and kept it safe, and it served us and all our patients very well.
As you acquired experience with Jehovah's Witness patients, did that lead to more referrals to your center for Jehovah's Witnesses that needed open heart surgery?
It did, but I don't know if the disease rate or the coronary vascular disease rate of Jehovah's Witnesses might be less.
Okay.
Just the lifestyle they have, both diet and social kind of things.
Now, the other big center in New York City that everybody hears about, of course, is New York Presbyterian. How much collaboration or was Cornell Weill a sister institution? I guess what I'm getting at,
Yeah.
Bill, is was there much, obviously there were regional meetings where you met people from the other hospital. How much collaboration or interaction did you have with the New York Presbyterian people?
Right. So I believe it was in 1997, Columbia University Medical Center merged with Cornell, or the New York Hospital, and the resulting program was the New York Presbyterian Hospital.
Okay.
So you had the Weill Cornell campus and the Columbia campus. So Linda Mongero, a friend and colleague of mine, we worked well. I mean, as much as perfusionists like to manage the whole program, it is up to the surgeons and hospital administration to see how it works. So yeah, we had different ways to do things. Still, I think most mergers, the hospitals remain kind of competitive, and I think in a good way to continue advanced therapies. So they've developed some techniques that we've eventually brought over, and I think vice versa.
Did your team or vice versa, the New York Presbyterian team, ever help you if there were any manpower shortages?
No.
Never?
No, well, they were also unionized uptown.
Okay.
So we couldn't actually.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Like in program development, I think we assisted each other with that. My son actually worked up there.
Is that right?
Yeah, my son's a perfusionist. Same name.
I did not know that.
Yep. And his wife.
His first name's not William, is it?
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay,
But he's actually recently moved. He just became chief perfusionist in Morristown
okay,
Hospital in New Jersey.
sure.
Big program.
So do you commute together?
No, no. He lives in Jersey as well, so.
Okay. Well, I'd like to shift now, Bill, to some of your career highlights or lowlights,
Yeah.
whatever the issue may be. What do you think have been some of the one or two major technological changes that you've seen over the course of your career?
I think some of the work on blood conservation,
Okay.
not just me, but the entire section has done. Myocardial preservation, I think, is a big one. Retrograde cardioplegia and just refinement in the additives to cardioplegia and the management. I think a big one was off pump. While it didn't help us, it forced us to do bypass better. So throughout my career, I remember my father, the banker, would be, oh, the stents are going to put you out of business. And then this off pump, he says, I'm reading, they say by 2000, no case will need a heart-lung machine. That'll put you out. But it forced us to look at emboli. I mean, Bob's worked on that, the fat emboli. It forced us for clamping techniques, calcifications, to look at blood pressure. And, Cornell developed these high blood pressure protocols to help reduce the incidence of stroke. And I think it just made bypass better. Those, and I think the next biggest one, ECMO.
Sure.
Just typically we would use a regular oxygenator, or the PsyMeds were around, and they would typically, not the PsyMeds, but the typical oxygenators would be leaking after 6 hours, and the mortality was almost 100%. But then when we came out with the new systems, I thought that was incredible. People could be on so long. We expected them now to survive. And what's the other? Ventricular assist devices.
Sure.
VADs. I remember getting involved with them. Actually, our first patient, I got kind of close to him, and I remember it was developing a clot. I guess the circuit had a lower connector in it, and a clot was developing. Probably shouldn't have had it in there. So we go to replace it, and at the time we got closer to the nurses because we never really worked with the nurses much. We dropped the patient off. But now we were sitting with them a little longer. And I remember surgeon said, we got to change this connector out.
Oh boy.
So they said, oh, we got to bring the code team. And so it was like, an easy thing to do, like take less than 30 seconds. Then we had everybody in there watching, and anesthesia came. And I remember they asked me, how long would this take? I said, literally 15 to 20 seconds. We're going to create a sterile environment. I'm going to scrub in with my assistant. And this guy, the patient, said, okay. So the anesthesia said, well, we want to put him to sleep for this. So I remember him saying, he was a tough guy. He said, Bill just said it's going to take 20 seconds. I can hold my breath for 20 seconds. So I'm like, whoa. So we did change it. He didn't feel a thing. He was kind of interested.
Sure.
He went on for a transplant eventually, but I thought the VADs were a big thing. Not just the technology, but bringing perfusion more up into the ICU, which eventually led to ECMO. And we actually started rounding on patients after that.
Well, that really is a segue into my next question. How was ECMO managed in your experience? Did you follow the University of Michigan pattern where ICU nurses were trained to become ECMO specialists,
Yeah.
or did the perfusion team actually sit some shifts?
Well, initially we did sit the shifts. We did receive training with the University of Michigan. I got to meet Dr. Bartlett, very nice man.
Yes.
He could be a surgeon that was a mentor and influencer for me. So we did start initially. We started significant training, simulation, and then it probably took 6 months or so where then the nurses were trained and they actually embraced it. We would go on rounds with them, follow up. If there were ever any instances where they need us, we would come in on call. And that's how we managed it, and still to this day, and that's probably, I don't know, 15 or so years.
So the institution essentially certified the ECMO nurses after
Yes.
they had gone through the didactic and simulation and
Yes.
probably preceptoring as well before they were actually
yeah.
considered ECMO specialists who would sit the shifts.
Yeah.
And I imagine in your experience too, like many places, infant ECMO, newborn ECMO was the way it started.
Yep.
But then that expanded to the pediatric population, and now adults, of course, are probably the largest group. What percent currently are the patient populations you're seeing in your setting?
I would say maybe 8% infant peds and 90 or so percent adult.
Okay.
Yeah. The peds is a bit more dynamic, so we do have people stay for those.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been rewarding as well with the pediatric population.
Sure. The other thing that people, some perfusionists have said is that when a patient's on ECMO as opposed to cardiopulmonary bypass, the bedside team may get to know the family
Oh, sure.
a little more than, open heart surgery. We really don't have much interaction at all with the family. Could you speak a bit about that aspect? Has that been a good thing in your view, or a bad thing? Or
I think it's
what has
good.
it meant to you to meet some of the patients' families?
Right. So, yeah. So when we started with the VADS, it started then moving more to ECMO as ECMO became more successful. We started the staff rounding and then meeting the family. And I think it does have impact on how you manage things in the operating room. You respect more of the work that the nurses did. That's what I really saw, that they had to deal with the physicians, from residents to the APPs, residents, physicians, surgeons, anesthesia team, and then the family as well.
Sure.
I remember actually speaking with the family, and they asked me, "Oh, we hear this is a death sentence for my loved one." So we had experience where they actually came off ECMO, and it was kind of new to the nurses. So I explained, well, if we thought that, this patient's as sick as you can be. So we do have hope for this patient that we could turn this around. It will take some time, though. Sometimes it's months.
Sure.
And I remember the nurse pulling me out of the room. "Why are you giving this patient false hope?" I said, "It's not false hope." And that patient actually did survive. And
Is that right?
yeah, very rewarding. You get someone as sick as they can be, and then months later they send you pictures of them traveling through Europe and having a great time. It's like,
Sure.
yeah.
Are there any other memorable cases, whether it be cardiopulmonary bypass or ECMO or VADS, that stick out in your mind, Bill, that you'll probably never forget? And these can be poor outcomes or very rewarding outcomes, but are there any that you're reminded of today?
The one with the VAD patient, that was one, and that was quite a while ago. One that was more recent, we did a lot of celebrities where I worked, so actually no really bad events with them. But one was, it was a senior physician, he was a chair, and it was his wife, and start the case, start cooling, and all of a sudden I can't flow. So I was thinking what it could be, and we were down, we couldn't flow, so really rewarming, we were concerned if that would make a difference. And we had cooled down pretty low. And I remember telling the surgeon, I said, "I can't flow," and he's like, "This is the time to tell me this. Like, you know who this is?" I said, "Yeah, it doesn't matter who they are," but I said, "Well, whatever you're thinking, I'm changing out the system." So I was concerned that even if I change, what if it happens again? So we changed out the system, works well. He says, you got to come talk to the husband.
Oh, boy.
So I said, sure. So I go. And as I
Did he
walk in,
accompany you, by the way? Sorry to interrupt.
No, he did. As he did, then he walked away.
Okay.
So the husband says, so you're the guy. I go, oh. And she just literally got up there. So I know the whole story. I said, okay, well, we'll have to see and see how it turns out. And we'll keep an eye, very close eye on her. Everything indicates that it should be okay. But she had been at low flow for quite a while. So the next morning I come in and her son is out the door, pleasant guy. And I'd never really met this woman before. And so I walk into the room and she says, who were you just talking to? I said, oh, it was your son. Which one? And so she was very critical of that son. I go, whoa, this is a tough woman. I think she's going to be okay. So the nurse comes in and she mentions something about she can't see out of one eye. Oh. I go, oh boy. All the things I was thinking last night trying to fall asleep are coming true now. So I asked her, I said, have you ever had this problem before? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, they said you're having trouble seeing out of the eye. She said, oh yeah, I wear special lenses. I said, oh, did you tell anyone? She said, no, no one asked me. You're the first one to ask. So
wonderful.
they get her glasses and then she's fine, but I felt so relieved. I still never forget that.
Sure.
And it wound up, it was probably cryoglobulinemia. And, you know, people said, oh, don't you monitor pressures on the inlet and the outlet? I said, and like I mentioned, like 60,000 or so cases, I've never seen this before. And I had looked it up, and there's one paper that was referenced like 6 different ways. It was just one. And so they recommended inlet and outlet pressures, and you know, following that, I asked people. I don't know anyone who did that. Mm-hmm. Mostly just outlet line pressure. But yeah, we tried to rinse the thing out. Even when it was warm, we could never rinse it. We couldn't flow anything through it.
So did this change your practice? Did you then begin measuring inlet and outlet pressures?
We did not, no. We talked it over with the surgeon, because we've had instances where lines were cracked on those pressure monitoring lines.
Yes.
And depending on how the transducer was set up, we actually had a couple cases where the transducer was up high and air was in the arterial line. And we had just started using the incorporated arterial filters. They were part of the membrane.
Yes.
So fortunately, we would see that air in the system before we went on, and either the lower was tightened too much or something was cracked or the glue was. So we thought the risk of the solution was riskier than not doing it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you?
We never monitored pre and
No.
post, just post.
Yeah.
Post. So in your settings, either on Long Island, New York City, or now in New Jersey, do you have students rotate through for clinical affiliation?
Yes. So I mentioned started a school at Downstate. It didn't last too long. Then associated with the Richard Chan's program.
Yes.
When it was Eastern Heart. And then he went to LIJ. And then now it's part of Hofstra, so take their students. And we've worked with Ed with the Midwestern program.
Okay.
We work with the program in Philadelphia. And we're looking at Lipscomb, their program as well, taking students. So we always have students. I find it very rewarding working with them.
Sure.
I think it keeps you on your toes, learning. They can help you, you know.
Has the staff embraced having students?
I would say majority, but there are some that typically don't want students with them.
Okay.
I mean, even from when I was a student, you could tell the ones like, you
Sure.
can leave now.
Sure.
You know.
I'd like to ask you to drill down, if you could, Bill, on teamwork. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think everybody agrees that teamwork, when you're involved in something as complex as cardiopulmonary bypass or the other extracorporeal technologies, is very, very important. But what aspect of teamwork have you either learned or used over the years to make it work well?
Sure. Some of it is, sometimes you don't need to work on it. People just get along. So you try to work with the anesthesia team. And sometimes even the techniques like RAP, you're kind of forced to work with them, talk with them. And you can help each other out. Sometimes it's not as easy, it's not as organic as you think and so you have to come up with some plans to make it work. So either some conference time in the hospital where it's multidisciplinary, you work with that, invite the surgeons, the anesthesiologists, the nursing. Sometimes we even bring administrators in. So meetings like that where everyone has to describe their role on a certain procedure. Sometimes we've set up a set of behavioral standards, how you have your code of conduct in a hospital, and a lot of times that's something basically if you do, you'll get fired. So much short of that, you need to find ways to make people want to work together or at least be respectful. So,
Sure.
And on that is how you leave your area. When you're done, shows a sign of respect. When the people come in the clean rooms, you don't be dropping stuff on the floor. More respect with that. Respect everybody's role. And you do some of their role and help them out. Because respect and dignity, maintaining that, I think, is the important thing that makes people want to work with you, wants to be with you. I think managing up. Like,
What do you mean by managing up?
yeah, by that I mean when someone's either talking about your staff, or you just don't contribute to that, or find ways that are positive there. Sometimes people come in late, don't just give them the worst case of the day, like maybe have a cup of coffee on them, and they kind of feel guilty when you do that. It treats them in a respectful way. I mean, if it continues, then there's other issues that you got to manage.
Sure.
But don't assume the worst. Like I see that still in stories. I heard this happen. I said, well, you just heard part of the story. Don't. And I think I kind of forced people not to do that. So maintain respect. Like you don't know the whole story, why, what happened, how it happened, and get all the information. I think that helps the team because they always hear like somebody talking negative about them. So, and that takes work. And as
Sure.
a leader, you're responsible to maintain that.
Sure.
Sometimes you can bring it up at meetings, like if people go offline, or if you just say, okay, let's park that for now, we'll get to that later. But maintaining respect, because if you look at typically when we're talking about a problem, especially in healthcare, some patients gotten injured or, or they're killed or something. So, and that's, I think we had one of the talks here, the second victim. There's the patient and the one that actually caused the injury. So you got to be careful with that. We have these root cause analysis meetings. That's
Sure.
when you have some serious events. So as a leader, you need to show people the respect, show them how they should act, and just keep the conversations positive. I don't know if that explains it all, but
Well, it does, and I'd like to follow up on what you said a few moments ago, and that is the multidisciplinary team meetings. That's not really a debriefing, is it? And are these meetings set up regularly, Bill?
yes.
Once a month?
It depends on what we're doing. Sometimes they may need to be more if we're starting something.
Sure.
So we'll do it weekly or sometimes even daily. But like the M&M meetings, I think it's big. Typically it's just doctors and maybe the chief perfusionist. So I try to bring staff and have them come to the meetings because they see what we're trying to do to correct some of the problems. And then just having a small group of the small cohort of people, either nurses or technicians, they will get the message out to everybody else. So I kind of force that. So, and get the story, the correct story out.
Sure. Well, I may be dating myself, but you ever heard the phrase shared governance?
Yes.
I mean, is that still in vogue? I mean, I think that came from the nursing profession.
Yeah, I think it's bigger with nurses.
Okay.
But like I said earlier, we can learn a lot from nursing, the discipline that they have. And I see that discipline is helpful because I see sometimes people, whether it's perfusionists or not, they kind of invent in the moment. Like, what were you thinking there when you did that? And, well, I thought, it's like, whoa. Just stick to the program.
Sure.
Make the job boring. And, you can have your exciting time when you leave work. But I guess someone once meant, perfusion is 95% boring and 5% sheer terror.
Yes.
And during those moments of sheer terror, people typically don't get any smarter. And with the surgeons yelling or someone yelling, it doesn't help the situation. But it is difficult because of the consequences, what can happen.
Sure. Well, for the last section of this interview,
Sure.
Bill, I'd like to ask you about some perspectives, philosophies, reflections. Specifically, what do you think is one or two of the most important personal attributes to make a good perfusionist?
I think one of them, availability.
Mean being on call?
Being available in the moment.
Oh, in the whole scheme.
Yeah. I think it's also what you do when people aren't looking. I think that's important. I mean, we have all the trainings supposed to be considered, prerequisite, but those are the things. And I say being available, sometimes people are doing other things while they're ready to go on bypass. They got other things going on at home, but being in the moment.
Sure.
Focused is important. And I learned that with Dr. Krieger. One of the things he did before the case, he would review everything that could happen, could go wrong, and you wouldn't want to talk to him at that moment. So I think that's important. He would focus then. I have had administrators who maybe weren't the kindest to us, and they said, I need to talk to the surgeons about something. I said, with Dr. Krieger at 8 o'clock, he'll be at the sink. That's the best time to get him.
Sure.
And,
Sure. Well, what does it mean to you to have been a perfusionist as long as you've been a perfusionist, Bill?
I found it very rewarding. Got to use a lot of different skills. Even I had been trained in economics, so that's helped me with some administrative stuff. The rewarding, patients, as I get to leave the hospital every day, but the patients don't. And we need to offer them the best we can. And I think we have all the resources that we need, but it's usually what's inside of you that's going to make that difference.
Sure.
So that's what I get out of it.
And you did get an advanced degree somewhere along the road on your career, didn't you? Don't you have a master's degree?
I have an M.B.A, yes.
M.B.A.
So, I found that very helpful. I focused on more statistics with it and process improvement. So I've used that. We also learned finance and some of the projects that we did. You did learn about billing, coding, things like that you need to be profitable to keep the organization running. But with the statistics, a technique I use to this day is drawing things out, kind of fishbone diagram. And it's amazing, a lot of the problems we fixed. If you take people, process, technology, and equipment, you can put everything associated with that. And one of the projects we worked with was more recently, STEMI, daughter balloon times.
Yes.
And we looked at it. The numbers weren't very good. So we looked at all those components I mentioned, and the big thing was the equipment. So we started the meeting. I said, all right, how do we get EKGs? Well, we get an EKG, and I said, okay, but some of these times I see you had 1,000 minutes here. Like, what's going on with that? Oh, the clocks in the EKG machine are sometimes not calibrated. They're like a couple of days old. So I said, okay, so basically do a balloon, before we do anything, it's going to be 48 hours. I said, so what are we doing for that? Well, we got to get them calibrated. All right, we can end the meeting right there. Let's work on getting them calibrated. So we got that done, who does them? Well, we can't find a text all the time. Well, who's responsible for them? So we fixed that. So they're ready to move on to like getting the patient in the room. I said, let's just get the EKG first to see if it's really a STEMI. And
Sure.
so we go through all this process, and it was quite rewarding. Within 3 months, we went from like 72% up to 100% under 90 minutes. And that's a big deal. I mean,
That is a big deal.
patient-wise, it's safer, more life saved. As a benchmark for the program, it's very positive for us.
You were also involved with helping set up the licensure in the state of New York. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so working with Richard Chan, he was the primary energy behind that. It was, and he had warned us, it would be a tough process. We went up there a few times, and I remember meeting with the local government officials, and it was like a 3.5-hour drive up there, and had a stack of papers, and basically like they were going to end the meeting within a couple minutes. He says, okay, so I'm not sure what you guys have, and the secretary's like, well, Your Honor, here's like a whole stack of papers. They were saying, okay, good to know. And so it was interesting. We got a lobbyist.
Okay.
And fortunate for us, they didn't charge us really. It was basically for some of his expenses. And I remember going up with him, and I was saying, like, how's this going to help? He walks in, hi everybody, and Tom, we need you to sign this. I'm like, holy moly, look at that. So we had to do that, and then there was some ideas with people that hadn't been certified yet, what we were going to do that, so we grandfathered them in. People were upset, but you had to start somewhere.
Sure.
It was very positive. There was an issue with blood gases, where they said we couldn't do the blood gases, the perfusionists. So we had to demonstrate, and I just said, let's draw this out. And we drew it out, like what it would cost, who's going to do it. Hospitals would have to change everything that they're doing, get machines in the ORs, bring a lab in, and I think that we had it on posters and showed them what it would look like. And so they agreed to that a perfusionist could do it. Then I guess there was things with ECMO. Are those considered, would they be licensed? So we worked with that, and that was successful.
Sure.
And we really haven't, I've been on the board since, and haven't really had many issues of, licensing or criminal actions or anything like that. So I guess New York State is in good hands with their perfusionists.
Sure. Well, can you tell us just a little bit about your time as a leader of AmSECT? You were president in 2018 to 2020.
Yep.
And you were also, prior to that, I guess, or maybe concurrently with that, prior to that, you were in charge of organizing the annual meeting. That must have been
conference
quite a big undertaking. Tell us what that experience was like, Bill.
And I forget who said it, but if you're not part of your professional organization, you're not a professional. That is true. So I found it as a good opportunity for leadership development, organizational skills. You have a group that you're working with, you have to work well with them. There's a big expectation, the meeting has to be profitable, it's got to be like something that people want to come to. So worked on that, we developed some new ideas. We did some education in the conference, in the exhibit halls, that they would give presentations, so you get some points there. It's a lot of good information. I still learn when I go talk with the vendors. So we did that. We added, it was basically, we'd give scenarios, I forget what we called it, but it was tables would sit and we'd give them a scenario and they would discuss how they would manage that. That was something we put together. And then the ICEBP committee further developed, and I think that's helped our profession. It's led to a higher level of engagement with the physician staff.
Sure.
If you look, we're involved with the best practices, the guidelines for blood and patient management. So that's been helpful. I was also secretary for the AmSECT, and then the latest was the president. It's a tough job. It's a big time commitment, but I learned a lot. I mean, actually, of things I do now, some confidence. Like there's some tough decisions you have to make, and not everybody on the board says, oh yeah, whatever he says is a great idea. So there's some conflict, so you have to learn how to manage conflict. And more on organizational skills. Learned a lot with that. The actual management group was helpful in guiding me or consulting, actually the whole team. But took every opportunity I could to work with them.
Sure, sure. So really, I had skipped over this question. You mentioned going around to the various exhibits and learning about new equipment, even some techniques probably from the manufacturers.
Sure.
Just in general, what is your view of the cardiopulmonary industry?
Very high.
Okay.
I think they have a lot to offer. They have, their margins are very thin now, so they don't have much to work with, like revenue-wise. So they have to bring out a good product. They have to market it well. They have all these regulations that they have to be careful with. I mean, it's a lot different than many years ago where they would really entertain everybody. But I think they're very good with helping, they educate us how to make the products work, when it works, when it doesn't work. Their liaisons are helpful in getting us education. There's less of them now. So it's interesting, we don't have many choices for, oxygenator systems, even heart-lung machines.
Right.
Basically, of the two out there. The other techniques are these long-term assist devices, which they help educate us, and I think that's more the work we're going to be doing, because people were concerned that there wouldn't be jobs for perfusionists, but you see help wanted everywhere, and it's hard to find people.
Sure, sure.
So,
well, as we get towards the end of
Yep.
this fascinating interview, quite frankly, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with the people who will be viewing your interview, Bill,
Yeah.
online?
I was interested in a conversation this morning about perfusion, what they do outside of the ORs, and respect they have.
You just lost your microphone.
Again?
Stop us and go ahead again.
So, Bill, as we wind up this fascinating interview over the last 60 minutes, do you have any closing thoughts for the younger perfusionists who may be watching your interview once we post it to the AmSECT website?
Sure. I see a lot of enthusiasm for perfusionists to want to get more involved, possibly administratively. I actually did a talk recently about this, moving from perfusionist to administration. There was a lot of work that I had done through all the various aspects in the hospital with administration, the business degree, working with cardiologists. as
Transfusion
one.
committee?
Transfusion committees. Peri-op, I was a director in peri-op services, so learned a lot of the perioperative business. Also, I was over anesthesia as well. So you should take all these opportunities beyond committees. It's a little extra work that may not be part of your wage. Some late nights. Also, with the professional organizations, getting there, that's basically a free opportunity to learn a lot of these skills of organizational skills, administrative skills, conflict resolution. The other piece, I would recommend knowing your job as well as possible. Like any opportunity you have, when you're waiting for a case, read about perfusion issues or things that could help your career rather than the new car you may be buying. And the other piece, always maintain respect and dignity. I think that's important. Understand that the surgeon, when they're working, they have a whole crowd watching them. Things could go wrong. And even I've had times where, a line was clamped. And I said, oh, drainage is a little slow down here. And they move a clamp, like, just go on with it. You don't have to comment on anything. It's a very stressful job for them. It's for us as well. And I think when you give the respect, you get it back, with anesthesiologists as well. Just about everybody. Because we're in a very unique business where, you know, when bad things happen, it's very bad.
Yes.
As an administrator, I can lose some money, but it's not as bad as if someone loses a life because of a mistake I made.
Sure.
You don't forget about that.
No, you don't. You don't.
Yeah, and I appreciate, Mark, everything you've done for safety. I've read those books, the Green Book and the Burgundy Book, and I use that a lot. Just it helps me. Like, you got to be the best on your game, because you don't want to be part of those legal events or whatever. It's not just illegal, but you do remember bad things for the long time, and just being the best you could possibly be.
It's very kind of you to say that, Bill. The last question, and I promise it's the last, if you have any, what I would call historical papers from AmSECT.
Sure.
Bob Groom and I did go to the national office when the previous management company was in Chicago, and we retrieved a lot of very old issues of the journal.
Okay.
The famous letter when the AMA recognized perfusionists in 1977. But you may have something in your file cabinet, or even, I hate to say, go back to the old slides, but you may have some historical slides from all your cases that
Will do.
if you could share that with us.
I mean, I was envious with Bob, all the pictures he had. I don't know if maybe I was the youngest in my family and they stopped taking pictures by then. But one thing I do have, when Wayne Isom won the Gibbon Award,
Yes.
he had a video made of several of his, they were basically all entertainers and news broadcasters, and they gave a talk on their sets about perfusion and how what perfusion meant
I remember
for them.
that. David Letterman,
Yeah.
Larry King.
Yes, I could probably get that. I don't know if that would be worthwhile for you.
Would be very worthwhile.
Oh, okay.
I remember when Dr. Isom showed that at the Academy meeting. Well, I'd like to thank you very, very
thank you
much.
very
This,
much.
this has been just terrific. We really appreciate
Yep.
you taking the time to fly down here for this interview.
Oh, my pleasure.
And we will be in touch as we get a transcript made,
Okay.
full approval from you, and we'll certainly let you know when it's posted to the AmSECT website.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark.
Did we make it?
Enjoyed my time.